you're a teacher who's thinking about leaving, but the unknown feels overwhelming, you're not alone. Leaving the classroom can feel like walking into unfamiliar territory, and it's hard to move forward when you can't see the path, or worse, when you feel like you're stuck in a hole. I've been there. That uncertainty, that hesitation, that's normal, but you don't have to navigate it alone. I'm Vanessa Jackson. I spent 25 years in the classroom, and I've also worked inside the hiring world, helping people get jobs and understand how those systems really work. Now, I help teachers just like you navigate that in-between space so that you can move out of burnout and into a career outside the classroom that actually fits. This is Teachers in Transition. Let's get you out and into what's next.
Hi, welcome back to Teachers in Transition. I'm Vanessa and I am really happy you are here today. Excuse me. Today we are going to talk about the ridiculous idea of AI robots replacing teachers, a hack to save you from junk mail, and some practical resume tips. I saw a video recently of Melania Trump introducing this idea for a robot teacher for the future called Plato, I think. And I'll be honest, I did not care as much about the name as I did about the mental image it gave me as it toddled out to the microphone, because all I could think was, put that thing in a room full of middle schoolers, and then at the end of the day, tell me how that goes. I predict a face, some graffiti, maybe some anatomically correct parts. I also predict someone trips it at least once. And I don't say that just to be funny. I say that because it points to something deeper that I think we are still fundamentally misunderstanding about teaching. AI works when everything goes according to plan. Teaching is what happens when it doesn't. And that's the disconnect. Because most people think teaching is still this very linear process. You deliver content, you check for understanding, and then you move on. And this is the part that gets left out, that it's all happening with willing students in a perfect world. Students who are ready, regulated, focused, and interested in learning. It reminds me of when I took the tests for my professional teaching certificate. Every question was filtered through the lens of, in a perfect world with unlimited funding. I did great on that test, passed with flying colors, even though I knew that reading some of those questions that the answers were ridiculous when placed in a real world setting. If you've ever been in a classroom, you know that's not the starting point, that's the goal, on a good day. And I think that part of the reason this misunderstanding persists is that a lot of the people designing these systems are remembering themselves as students, and maybe they weren't the best student, or maybe they were the perfect student. Maybe they showed up, did the work, followed directions, checked all the boxes. But the problem is that experience doesn't prepare you for what happens when things don't work perfectly. I had an experience once. I had a knee injury that overlapped a family trip to SeaWorld, and I ended up in a wheelchair for the day. And I thought I understood accessibility. I really did. I knew ramps were important. I knew seating mattered. I knew intellectually that accommodations were necessary. Y'all, I had no idea. I had no idea what it felt like to be constantly in a less than optimal position. I had no idea what it felt like to always have to rely on someone else. How those ramps were sometimes hard to find. I had no idea how often my view would be blocked. And I had no idea how frequently people would just step in front of me like I wasn't even there. And it wasn't malicious. It was just they didn't see it. They didn't experience it, so they didn't account for it. And that's when it hit me. You don't really understand a system until you experience where it breaks. And that's what I think is happening here. We have people designing systems for classrooms who have never experienced what happens when things don't go according to plan. I saw a video recently of a Waymo having issues on a Houston freeway, and I just about lost it. Houston, freeways. Y'all, I grew up on those roads. If you remember the old racing gang pole position, that's a pretty good definition of highways in Houston, Texas. Speed limits are made up, and the goal is to never have to slow down. I had a classmate once who said, and I am not kidding, I just closed my eyes and hit the accelerator to merge onto 610. And if you want to put a self-driving car into that environment and assume everything's going to go according to plan, that's the point. These systems work beautifully in controlled environments. Classrooms are not controlled environments. They aren't even remotely close to a controlled environment. On those testing days when everybody is working very hard to control all of the aspects of the environment, it is still not a controlled environment. They are much closer to Houston freeways, fast, unpredictable, full of humans making decisions in real time that don't always make sense. And I want to be really clear here. I'm not anti-AI. I use AI all the time to help deal with my schedule and to help as a tool. It's incredibly useful when it's used correctly. But tools are supposed to support human judgment, not replace it. And what concerns me is how quickly we are applying these tools in spaces where we don't even fully understand the human work we are trying to replace. Because the hardest part of teaching isn't teaching. It's getting someone to care. It's reading the room. It's catching the moment before everything goes sideways. It's managing 25 to 30 human beings with 25 to 30 different realities in real time and still finding a way to move learning forward. I've actually said this at a school board meeting before. A gynecologist and a neurosurgeon are both doctors. They both went to medical school, but they are definitely not interchangeable for my brain surgery. And another one, kids are not beans, and the bean counters need to find a new hobby. I never got dramatic enough to bring a jar of beans and set it on the table, but I thought about it. Because this idea that people are interchangeable, that kids are standardized, that learning is predictable, that's not new. Plato isn't the problem, it's the thinking behind it. And I've seen that thinking before too. Back with those professional exams, everything was framed in a perfect world with unlimited resources. And the problem is, that's not the world we teach in. And it's not the world these systems are being designed for either. If your solution only works in a perfect world, it is not a solution for a classroom. And when the people making these decisions are working from a limited understanding of the reality, what they create is a system that is simply not sustainable for the humans inside it. And if you were one of the many people who watched Plato toddle out there and talk in that odd feminine voice, complete with vocal fry, why? Just why with the vocal fry? And looked in disbelief or laughed yourself some form of silly, you were not alone. I was laughing too. These units are wickedly expensive. Where will that money come from? And what are the expectations when it needs an upgrade and it needs it right then in the middle of class, or it just can't work anymore? Because we know that's going to happen. Everyone listening to this podcast has had their laptop betray them and do an unplanned update in the middle of something else more important. Because let's face it, things are booked so back to back in a classroom setting that there is never downtime for that sort of thing. It will be interesting to see how these things go. But my first prediction is that schools don't have the money for this sort of thing, and tech companies haven't yet gotten that message. And moving on to the teacher hack. The teacher hack is designed to help save you some time or money, to give you space back in your day or just in your brain so that you can do the things that you want to do. And this week's teacher hack has to do with junk mail. It's super simple. Get a box that fits your car space. Maybe it's an empty paper box that you take from the teacher workroom. Maybe it's just a large shoebox. If you want to make it fancy, you can print out and tape that little triangle with the arrow symbol that symbolizes recycling. When you pick up your mail, the junk goes immediately in the box. Don't even let it in your house to marinate and require dealing with that much later. You can dump it in the larger school recycling from time to time, or on an as needed basis, you can dump it directly in your recycle bin if you have one. And moving on to our career transition and job search segment. In this week's segment on career transition and job search, I want to talk about something very practical because this misunderstanding shows up. Let's talk about the top section of your resume, specifically the place where a statement goes. I know that there are people out there that say resumes are useless and that they are going away, but I don't think that they are. People want to have something in their hands when talking to a potential hire, and they want to be able to refer back to the claims in that resume later, just in case the applicant wasn't entirely honest. And as I've said before, and undoubtedly will say again, every job description is just asking a question. And that question is, can you do this job? And your resume is the answer to that question and only that question. You will absolutely have more skills in your toolbox that you will be asked for in that job description. And the hard part will be limiting yourself to just the scope of your answer. And in every resume is a statement, but should you use an objective statement, a summary statement, or a branding statement? Objective statements used to be the go-to standard, something like seeking a position where I can utilize my skills and grow professionally. It doesn't say much, does it? And if you're Gen X, Boomer, or even some elder millennials, you were probably taught to use an objective statement. But we don't do that anymore because everyone has the same objective. The objective is to get a job. That's it. Everything else is fluff. So then the world moved into summary statements, something like dedicated educator with 10 years of experience in curriculum development and classroom management, looking to use skills to pivot into event planning or project management or whatever else. And that's better, especially if you're transitioning careers or applying somewhere a little more traditional, maybe a little more stodgy. But the problem is it's still generic. You can swap that statement onto 100 different resumes and it would still make sense. And that means it's not really helping you stand out from the literal hundreds and thousands of other resumes out there for every job description. What we're seeing more and more now is the move towards a branding statement. And a branding statement is more than a headline, less than a paragraph, but it tells me very quickly who you are and how you operate. And it lets just a little bit of your personality show through. Because on an otherwise very dry document, that's your moment for a vibe check. And I know, personal brand sounds very Hollywood, but all it really means is this. It's who you believe you are, how you present yourself, and how the world actually experiences you. And where those circles overlap in your personal Venn diagram, that's your brand. As an example, I consider myself a fierce advocate for educators. That means I'm going to go to bat for teachers. I'm not always going to soften the edges when I do it. I believe in public education. I believe in teachers. And I believe that making the work environment for teachers better is a core principle in fixing what's wrong with public education. And people experience me that way. So when I say that, that's not just something I think about myself. That's something that shows up consistently. You aren't making anything up with a branding statement. You're translating what you already do into language that the outside world understands. Because the world already misunderstands what teachers do. Your job is to make it impossible to misunderstand you. And that's really the thread that runs through all of this. I don't think a robot is going to replace teachers. I do think they're going to try, and I think it's going to fail spectacularly. But I do think that this moment reveals something important. We still don't fully understand what teachers actually do. And until we do, we're going to keep building solutions for a world that doesn't exist. And okay, if someone thinks that a robot teacher is about to survive a room full of students of any age, elementary, middle, or high schoolers, I just want to watch that demo from a safe distance. And if today's episode had you thinking, yep, people do not understand what teaching actually is, and that is the problem, then there's some things maybe you can do. If you're ready to talk through your exit strategy, book a free discovery session with me. There's no pressure, just a real conversation about what's next. You can head over to teachersintransition.com/calendar. The link is in the show notes. And if you're not even sure what you want to do outside of teaching yet, if you just know you have to do something because this isn't working anymore, that's exactly what Find Your Bearings is for. It's the starting point for clarity when you're stuck in the I can't stay but I don't know where I'm going phase. It will help you survey the terrain and come away knowing what matters to you most, what skills you have, and what jobs need those skills. Contact me and learn more. Whatever you choose, you don't have to figure it out alone. Hit follow, keep listening, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear that they're not nuts. They're just being burned up by a system that cannot appreciate what they're doing because it doesn't know what they're doing. Teachers in Transition is an independently produced podcast created to support educators navigating burnout and career change, and is completely created, produced, and edited by me, Vanessa Jackson. If this show has helped you feel less alone or gain clarity, I am asking for your help to support the podcast directly. You can support the podcast in a variety of ways. You can support by subscribing or reviewing wherever it is that you like to listen to your podcasts. You can share it with a teacher friend in need of support by sharing it with them. And you can even support the podcast financially for as little as $3 a month. You can head over to Teachers in Transition on the buzzsprout.com page to learn more. And until next week, keep going. And if you're feeling a little lost, we'll help you find your bearings. And don't worry, no robots required.